Afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. I'm going to talk a lot today about Hollywood. Perhaps because I don't want to talk about the Trump impeachment because it's so stupid. But Hollywood is important. It's important socially. It's important politically, and it's becoming ever more important socially and politically. Since the summer of Black Lives Matter, ever since Hollywood apparently has pledged to be all black all the time. There was a movie that came out 2 years ago called Ma, starring Octavia Spencer. And it's described by Wikipedia as a psychological horror film. Now, Octavia Spencer, is she the black actress who defecated in food which was served to white people in The Help? I think she might have been. But in any event, this film, Ma, is a film of revenge. Revenge against white people. The film was made by a white man, a white gay man called Tate Taylor, but apparently white people are horrible. White men especially, but white women as well. And I guess the last half hour of this is just a grand guignol, just a series of atrocities against white people. And the film ends ambiguously. And so guess what? This is from Entertainment Weekly. Ma director reveals killer sequel idea. Tate Taylor exclusively tells EW his idea for sequel, which has Ma switching professions. Ma might not be drinking alone much longer. Tate Taylor, director of the endlessly memed 2019 camp horror classic starring Octavia Spencer, as a murderous recluse targeting a clique of boozy teens in rural America, exclusively tells EW he's toying with an early idea for a sequel after the first film's cliffhanger ending. Can you believe how much Ma lives on? Isn't that just crazy? Taylor says during an interview for his newly breaking news in Yuba County. The original concluded with the film's central tortured teens, led by Diana Silvers, escaping Ma's clutches after she barricaded and maimed them in her basement. As the group escapes, Ma's house catches on fire, but instead of fleeing herself, Ma retreats to her bedroom, where she lays down with the body of Ben, her high school crush, and it's revealed accomplice in a sexual abuse plot against her that she had previously murdered. Her death is implied but never shown on screen. My idea is that she's moved to another town and she has open houses in another city and kills people in the open house. Taylor explains that potentially switching up Ma's profession from no-nonsense vet tech to killer realtor, because that sort of thing happens all the time in life. Vet tech? What is that? I think she'd be a real estate agent in the Pacific Northwest. Ooh, problematically white. And just murder white people looking at McMansions. White people. Boo! That's as far as I've gotten. Someone named Rebecca Alter, who is a journalist, had this to say on Twitter on May the 5th. Quote, I think she'd be a real estate agent in the Pacific Northwest and just murder white people looking at McMansions. That's as far as I've gotten. Rebecca Alter comments, this is something to live for. Last two words in all caps. So who is Rebecca Alter? Well, let's go to her LinkedIn. She lives in New York. Of course she does. She describes herself, I'm a news writer at Vulture and New York Magazine. I received an MA from NYU Steinhardt's program in Media Culture and Communication and a BA in English and Communications from McGill. She describes herself as journalist, blogger, social media problem solver, newsbreaker, entertainment reporter, conference lecturer, paper grader, proofreader, copy editor, idea haver, deck pitcher, freelancer, scriptwriter, brainstormer, investigative researcher, long former, academic award winner, self-starter, content generator, podcast producer, meme aggregator, hot take haver, inconsistent hyphen applier, and office cupcake bringer. Aww, isn't that sweet? It appears that she is a Canadian. And before she started working for New York Magazine, she was a freelance writer, a grad student at NYU, a teaching assistant there, a marketing intern, a communications intern. I wonder if she got paid for these jobs. Production intern, an intern at MDC Partners, a counselor and specialist at Camp Manitou, Canada, in Parry Sound, Ontario. Yeah, she put that on her resume. And legislative page at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Yes, definitely a Renaissance woman, no question. And let's look at some of her most recent articles. How are all the movies about COVID at South by Southwest this year? What do we want out of WandaVision? Anyway, Charisma Carpenter, I'll get to Charisma Carpenter a little later. Lucas Hedges has never seen a Michelle Pfeiffer movie. Oh, dear. Replace 33% of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City cast with Vanessa Bayer. The Powerpuff Girls are getting the Riverdale treatment from Diablo Cody. In 2007, Craig Ferguson said enough with the Britney Spears jokes. Oh my gods, Dan Harmon is making an animated series set in mythical Greece. And references to Miley Cyrus, Amanda Gorman, Jasmine Sullivan, and Eric Church. Of course, Dan Levy and Bowen Yang on SNL. Oh, Phoebe Bridgers rocked God, smashed her guitar on SNL last night. You get the idea, right? Endless trash. And that's all her schooling, graduate degree, leads to endless trash. But Rebecca Alter is unmistakably white, but perhaps she doesn't consider herself to be white. Perhaps she considers herself to be something else. And as always, my response to this comes from a Sweet Smell of Success, where Burt Lancaster tells Tony Curtis, don't pull down the gangplank, Sydney. You might want to climb back aboard. We have been told never again. Never, never again. But apparently, and especially after January the 6th, this doesn't apply to white people because white people are the worst. White people are all white supremacists, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, or whatever. Now, I suspect that if this latest iteration of the Ma franchise involved Ma hunting down and murdering gentrifiers in, Brooklyn, that might be a little too on the nose by Rebecca Alter. But I really think that our biggest problem is not racial minorities. It's the Quislings on our own side who enable them, amplify them, as they like to say. Oh, no, I'm not a white person. Well, I don't know if the revolution comes and Rebecca Alter finds herself threatened with the wall. Does she really think that telling us that she's Jewish and not white is going to save her? I don't think that it is. Perhaps she disagrees, and I certainly hope it never comes to this. But I think that it would be very useful for us, whenever given the opportunity, to let people like this know that they are Quislings, that they are scum, and they deserve only contempt. Does she think that there's nothing possibly irresponsible in movies which make heroes of black people who kill white people because of racial enmity? Does she really think that that possibly couldn't have an unhappy ending? But I suspect that despite all her schooling, she doesn't really think too much questions of this type. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Palcasso88. And Buddy, I heard it was minus 25 Fahrenheit in Edmonton the other day. It gets very cold there. It is snowing here in Victoria, and it is about 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, Victoria never gets colder than about 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and then only maybe for a couple of days a year. I'm probably about, 10 or 20 feet above sea level, so the snow is not sticking on the ground, which is good for me, because here in Victoria, they do not salt the streets. So trying to navigate them after it has been snowing is, dangerous. Chogokin666 says, Oscar for Best Actress in a Feces Scene. Very talented gal. And adds, oh yes, mise en scène inferior to feces in scène. Yes, that's quite good. I like that. I like that. David Shalit says, no, it won't save her. I don't know whether she understands, Ms. Alter understands this, but a great many, let's say, people of color would tend to hate her specifically because of her last name, maybe even more than white people. Woke Feculence says, Halper. Contracoup says regular Americans need to realize that these people are neo-Bolsheviks who will destroy everything. Anran says, despite her schooling is in part to blame for the nonsense in her head. Jason Bryan says, KMG, did you see the Capitol Hill faked shooting video? No, I did not. He continues, a guy named Woo's News made a 21-minute video showing all the strange things captured on January the 6th. I'd heard that the Democrats had began their impeachment in the Senate yesterday with sensational footage. Jason Bryan says, YouTube removed it immediately. I saved it after watching all 21 minutes. It is impossible to say it wasn't completely suspicious. What happened on January 6th and who was responsible, particularly for the violence and the storming of the Capitol, we're never going to know. We are never going to know. It is that simple. How do I email you the video, KMG? You can send it to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. So Hollywood is burning. It's not just COVID-19, which I found out yesterday. Well, I was watching the latest video on Red Letter Media, and I was interested in the film, not because I have any intention of seeing it, but the film is called The Batman. It is a reboot of the Batman film franchise because there's only been, like 9 major studio Batman films. So obviously we need another one right now. I was interested in this because it's directed by Matt Reeves, who has directed 2 of my favorite films of this millennium, Cloverfield in 2008 and Let Me In 2010. And then he made Dawn of the Planet of the Apes in 2014 and War for the Planet of the Apes in 2017. Now he's making a Batman film. And I thought, I believe Reeves, and he's 54 years old now, to be an exceedingly talented director, does he have to make reboots, tentpole movies, spandex movies? Is that what it's come down to? There's no room for anything original in Hollywood. But this movie, what it was it going to come out last year? And then it was going to come out this year. Now its release date has been pushed back to March the 4th, 2022. Are they paying people this whole time to sit around? Obviously, this movie was going to have a huge budget. How big is the budget going to be after COVID-19? I've seen it suggested that the latest Wonder Woman film, which is called Wonder Woman 1984. Yeah, 1984. And the film just seems like an absolute mess in all sorts of ways, but that this film could be the last of such movies, given that it's unlikely that the theaters are ever going to reopen in the way that they had existed previously. And after a year or two of three of people getting used to not going to the movies ever, how many of them are going to come back? But there's something else going on in Hollywood. And it is, I suppose it is a result of the Me Too movement, which began as, I don't know, an expression of solidarity and horror, but now it seems to be a contest. Me too, me too. Anyway, here's a story from the Hollywood Reporter. Agency studios debate when to drop a star who becomes toxic. And it begins with Armie Hammer, who, well, let's see. He was facing a tsunami of critical and embarrassing press after an Instagram account dubbed House of Effie posted a series of direct messages and videos purported to be from Hammer that detailed cannibalistic and rape fantasies as well as drug use. Hammer already had been asked to step off 2 projects in January. Oh, could you please remove your participation from our projects? No, he was fired. And his life is in ruins. Let's see, 3 years plus into Hollywood's Me Too era, which ushered in a closer examination of all types of bad behavior, from racial insensitivity to rape allegations. The number of misconduct cases reportedly has grown in frequency. Still, there remains a frustrating lack of consistency with regard to how the industry responds. Yeah, how come Bryan Singer still has anything to do with Hollywood? Yeah, I have my suspicions on why this is, but I won't speak about them now. On February 2nd, the management agency CAA dropped Marilyn Manson as a client after actress Evan Rachel Wood claimed that the rocker actor had abused her during their relationship, a move that came one day after his record label, Loma Vista Recordings, said it would no longer promote his current album or work with him on any future projects. He was subsequently cut by Starz American Gods and the Shudder series Creep Show. Now, I've talked about this previously on this live stream. I don't have very much sympathy for Evan Rachel Wood or any of the other accusers of Marilyn Manson. This is a man who is America's best-known Satanist, who has christened himself the Antichrist Superstar. Oh, so this man acted badly to women he was sexually involved with and to women who worked with him. Who could have seen that coming? Meanwhile, CAA opted to keep representing Shia LaBeouf, I believe that's how his ridiculous name is pronounced, after his former girlfriend and Honey Boy co-star singer FKA Twigs filed an explosive suit on December the 11th against LaBeouf, alleging sexual battery, assault, and infliction of emotional distress. After being asked about the actor's status with the agency for this story, CAA put him on hiatus. I've never heard of that before. a management agency putting people on hiatus. Twiggs' suit also chronicles a history of alleged abuse that LaBeouf perpetrated against stylist Carolyn Foe, as well as actress Mia Goth. The filing also points to a video of a verbal altercation between LaBeouf and Goth, in which the actor says, "If I'd stayed there, I would have killed her." Okay. LaBeouf replied to the suit December the 11th in a statement to the New York Times that read in part, "I have no excuses for my alcoholism or aggression, only rationalizations. I've been abusive to myself," oh dear, "and everyone else around me for years." Anyone who reads the gossip columns has known about Shia LaBeouf for many, many years. I do not understand this fellow's stardom. He is borderline ugly. He is a rubbish actor, and he looks deranged. But I guess that's the sort of people that they want in Hollywood today. Ryan Reynolds. I haven't heard any nasty stories about Ryan Reynolds. He is weird looking. His eyes are far too close together. He has gay face. He has a strange voice. And yet we see him becoming a top action star. I don't know. If someone had told me a few years ago that Chris Pratt would have become a top action star, having only seen him from Parks and Recreation, I would have said no. But he lost a lot of weight, and he shaved off his beard and got a better haircut and got pumped up. And I look at him now and I say, yeah, I can see that. But again, are we supposed to believe that people in Hollywood don't gossip about each other all the time? Everyone in Hollywood knew about Harvey Weinstein, and yet people got involved with him. Are we supposed to believe that, what is this stupid name again, FKA Twigs, had never heard all of the stories about Shia LaBeouf? Let's see. In October, director Alexander Payne exited HBO's true crime series Landscapers, a movie that came in the wake of Rose McGowan accusing the director of statutory rape. Yes, and Rose McGowan had kept this one in her pocket for how long? After denouncing pretty much everyone else in Hollywood. Look, I'm not denying that abuse goes on in Hollywood, but it has always been the case that people have essentially sold, or women especially, have sold their souls for stardom. And I'm going to, and even it's difficult, considering this problem, because we're talking about actresses here, and what do they do for a living? They lie for a living. They take on many different roles, typically dozens or perhaps even over 100 over their careers, in which they pretend to be different people. There's a novel by Muriel Spark from 1968, one of her best novels. It's called The Public Image. Interestingly enough, that was the inspiration for the name of the band that John Lydon formed after the Sex Pistols, The Public Image. And it's set in Rome. It's about an English actress named Annabelle who makes films in Italy, as many, let's say, English and American actors and actresses did, because conditions weren't so great for them in their home countries. And Annabelle becomes an enormous hit. There's something about her. She's a kind of mousy, nondescript woman in real life, but the camera captures something about her so much that she is dubbed the Tiger Lady. Her husband, who is also in the industry, becomes desperately jealous of her, and he decides to take the ultimate revenge against her. No, not murder, suicide. And he does it in a very odd place. He does it in Rome's catacombs. And he sends a letter to the newspaper, which is written in a wholly false style. He writes it in the style, histrionic, Italian style, with many appeals to Mama. Oh, Mama, you don't know how they've treated me, how she has treated me. And so as I say, her husband, Frederick, kills himself, and Annabelle is famous in a way that she didn't want to be famous. And she finds herself in the middle of a very unpleasant incident in her apartment in Rome. I'll read from the book. Annabelle started to weep over the baby, her baby, holding the glass awkwardly while she cradled the baby in one arm and secured him with the other elbow. She craned forward her head to sip the wine over the baby's body. The doctor put the aspirins half by half into her mouth, and she washed them down with the warm wine and let her tears splash onto the side of the glass. The widow said to the distance that it was a terrible thing to be left a widow with orphans. The other neighbors, encouraged to tears as copious as Annabelle, said many times how true this was. Annabelle had finished her drink, and now she sniffed in an effort to control and led the way to the drawing room. Behind her, she heard the child's voice again. The actresses can make themselves cry. They have to learn how to do it. Annabelle turned with a horrified gasp on her cynical enemy. She had discerned an echo of Frederick's voice, forever questioning her sincerity, taunting, so that she had come to defend her actions fiercely, troubled by all this probing into motives, as a cat, too often disturbed in its sleep, becomes fierce. She half forgot that her tormentor was a child. She said, "Get out of here, you beast!" Well, the father, in the meantime, cuffed the child on the head. "Quite right," said the neighbors, more in commendation of the doctor's action than Annabelle's words. The child wailed like a knifed victim and clung to her mother. "Go on, get out, leave my house," Annabelle said wildly. "She is overwrought by the tragedy," the Italian widow told the distant heir, and everyone agreed with her. It was not customary to order children, however naughty, out of one's house, or to call them beasts as if they were adults. The point I'm trying to make is that actresses are often histrionic in their films and in their personal lives. They are constantly hooking up with other people in the industry, saying, "This is the one. Oh, I've never had a love like this. Oh, we're already looking forward to the future." And then, I don't know, a few months or maybe a few weeks or maybe a year or two later, there is the inevitable breakup with the vicious accusations coming from both sides. Just to sum up, these people are really not to be trusted. So it makes it difficult to analyze the claims that they make. Here is another such story from Laura Bradley at the Daily Beast. And it's about someone called Charisma Carpenter, who I'm afraid I was only dimly aware of. I don't really know whether she has anything like a career anymore. Months after Ray Fisher accused Joss Whedon of abusive on-set behavior during Justice League reshoots, another actor has spoken out against the director, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel alum Charisma Carpenter. She starred as the popular Sunnydale teen Cordelia Chase for 3 seasons on Buffy before moving to its spin-off for an even more robust arc that came to an awkward, disastrously executed halt when her character became possessed before lapsing into a coma. That's Joss Whedon for you. He just loves that mystery box. For nearly 2 decades, I have held my tongue and even made excuses for certain events that traumatize me to this day, Carpenter wrote in a statement on Twitter Wednesday. Joss Whedon has abused his power on numerous occasions while working together on the sets of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. While he found his misconduct amusing, it only served to intensify my performance anxiety, disempower me, and alienate me from my peers. Whedon's public image has faced several blows in recent years. In 2017, his ex-wife, Kay Cole, wrote that the director is a hypocrite preaching feminist ideals to mask his own infidelities. And of course, we never see that in Hollywood or anywhere else in the world. There was also the time when his not-so-feminist script for Wonder Woman leaked. Oh, dear. In her statement, Carpenter claims the director has a history of being casually cruel. Whedon has created hostile and toxic work environments since his early career, Carpenter continued. Some examples: his ongoing passive-aggressive threats to fire me, which wreaks havoc on a young actor's self-esteem, and callously calling me fat to my colleagues when I was 4 months pregnant, weighing 126 pounds. He was mean and biting, disparaging about others openly, and often played favorites. That never happens on a set, pitting people against one another to compete and vie for his attention and approval. In addition to his comments about her weight, Carpenter alleged in her Twitter statement that Whedon once called her into a meeting to interrogate and berate her for a rosary tattoo she'd recently gotten. Oh, so here we have an actress who has started filming a movie and she gets a presumably rather large tattoo on her body, which is going to be visible. And she didn't think there would be any problem about that. Fans have long speculated that Whedon fired Carpenter from Angel's fourth season because she was pregnant. Whedon, meanwhile, simply told TV Guide at the time that the writers had taken Cordelia's story about as far as it could go. Yes, she claims elsewhere that she was forced to do very strenuous stunts when she was heavily pregnant. Now, the question is whether she knew she was pregnant when she signed on to another season of the show. You've seen shows where the female characters are pregnant, and the more pregnant they get, the more difficult it is to disguise their pregnancy. I remember Elaine on Seinfeld. It became increasingly ridiculous to pretend that she was not pregnant. But of course, a sitcom is rather different from an action show, is it not? Due to long and physically demanding days and the emotional stress of having to defend my needs as a working pregnant woman, perhaps she should have considered leaving the show of her own volition if she was unable to perform because she was pregnant. And some actor named Ray Fisher, who I believe is a black man, complained about Josh Whedon. I believe he got fired from his show. And the suggestion is that he was fired because he was a black man, which frankly, particularly in these times, I find this impossible to believe. Let's see. Sarah Michelle Gellar, we haven't heard much from her recently, has also spoken out. Why I'm proud to have my name associated with Buffy Summers. I don't want to be forever associated with Joss Whedon, she said. I'm more focused on raising my family and surviving a pandemic currently. Oh my God, is this going to happen? Are people going to start referring to themselves as COVID-19 survivors? People who have never even had the disease? It's going to happen. It's going to happen, isn't it? Oh, okay. So I don't know what happened on the set there, and I'm certainly no fan of Josh Whedon. But we find that even the most successful actresses apparently never can stop complaining. I mean, Brie Larson never shuts up. As I said before, if I'd won a Best Supporting Actress Oscar and top-lined an action film that grossed $1.2 billion, I'd be in a pretty good mood. But then I'm not Brie Larson, am I? From the Daily Mail, I was the overweight girl who would always be at the end of the line. Kate Winslet. Poor Kate Winslet. She claimed she didn't feel like she belonged in Hollywood even after the success of Titanic. Sure she did. Sure she did. The actress, 45, spoke candidly Tuesday as part of a panel alongside Michelle Pfeiffer, Rashida Jones, Vanessa Kirby, and Andra Day for the Los Angeles Times. I was the overweight girl who would always be at the end of the line, and because my name was a W, sometimes I wouldn't even get in the door of the audition because they'd run out of time before the W's. And I was in Titanic. It's mad. Oh, that really happened. that the female lead of the biggest film of all time. No, I'm sorry, whatever your name is, Winslet. We don't have time to get to your audition because your name begins with a W. Titanic? Yeah, I think I heard of that. But no, we don't cast people based on their box office success. After appearing in Titanic, Kate went on to star in a number of independent films, choosing to stay out of the Hollywood limelight. The holiday star said of her decision, "The honest answer is I was scared of Hollywood, a big scary place where everyone had to be thin and look a certain way. And I knew that I did not look that way or feel like I fit there. So if I was ever going to belong, I had to earn my place. And to me, I hadn't earned it." Now, it is true enough that Kate Winslet is somewhat heavier than Hollywood wants. I think this is balanced out by the fact that the number of men who cite Kate Winslet as, I don't know, the woman they like to spend a night with or, be married to is off the charts. It's simply off the charts. 2 years after her daughter was born, I was asked to do Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I do believe that was a huge turning point in my career because from then on, people suddenly went, "Oh, she can do that?" Yes, it's called acting, Kate. It's called acting. I think she was excellent in that film. She played a character who was an absolute nightmare. But she was very good at it. But now she is complaining. She's complaining about her treatment. Similarly, an actress that none of you will have heard of, but is in, I don't know, the Daily Mail nearly every day. And she is more famous, I suppose, for her entirely not bogus marriage to one of the Jonas brothers. Women in films are interchangeable. Priyanka Chopra reveals she was told to leave a movie set when she asked for equal pay to her male co-star. The actress, 38, was advised to take the paycheck, which was nominal after she complained about salary inequality early in her year. The White Tiger star explained how she was forced to work with the system because there were so many other girls who would have taken the opportunity. Despite having a successful Bollywood career since 2003, Priyanka detailed how she essentially had to start over to make the transition to Hollywood. Can you imagine that? So she was acting in a different language in movies which are farcical and expected to act in English in movies that are not farcical. Yeah, starting over. Now, it's simply not true that you can expect to translate one's success from one language to another. There is an actress called Alice Braga, who is Brazilian, and apparently she is just scorching in Portuguese. I saw her in Red Belt, and I've seen her in other things, and she doesn't make it work in English. She simply doesn't. And I don't think that that should really be much of a surprise. But the idea that a Hollywood producer, any time in the last 5 years, is going to tell an actress, particularly one who is famous, it doesn't matter that she's not famous for acting, certainly not in the Western world, that women are interchangeable. First of all, women are not interchangeable in films. If you're any good as a producer, you want the best actresses you can get, no matter how small the part. And apparently she wanted a lot more money than she was getting, despite the fact that she is not known as an actress. And I'm trying to think of the name of this annoying English woman who is an actress of a sort, TV host, Jamila Jamil. Yes, Priyanka Chopra is nowhere near as good looking as Jamila Jamil. So I think if they were looking, for that kind of part, they would rather go with Jamil than Priyanka. But of course, if a actress doesn't get enough money for a role or big enough parts, it's always because of discrimination against women. But of course, some other woman got that part, and some other woman is making more money than you are. And this might even have something to do with talent. There's been a very strange controversy about what an indie film called Promising Young Woman, which I talked about a couple of weeks ago. And I haven't seen the film yet, but I've done some more investigation of it. And it appears that I might have misunderstood what the film is supposed to be, because I'm not entirely sure that we are supposed to regard the narrator of this film as reliable, as they say. I want to say something about rape and revenge films. That typically in these films, we see the horrible acts being committed. Now, assuming once again we have a reliable narrator, then we know the truth. And so the revenge is perfectly understandable, and it is even often enjoyable. I suppose a particularly famous example of that is Bergman's The Virgin Spring, and the rape and murder of Max von Sydow's daughter leads to the horrific murder of two men and a boy. And when I say a boy, I mean, I don't know how old is he, 12 years old or something. But see, we saw what happened in that film. There have been so many of these films, and films influence people socially. And oh yes, if a woman says that she was raped, she must have been raped. Why? Because you've seen it in the movies. When the police or prosecutors or juries consider these cases, they have not seen what has happened. And in many of these cases, it is little more than she said, he said. Perhaps that will be enough in the future in America, because Joe Biden last year promised that if he were elected president, then he would eliminate the presumption of innocence with regard to sexual assault. Yes, he actually said that. But this film, Promising Young Woman, it seems absolutely horrifying to me, and I suspect it is meant to be horrifying. I'll read the description from Wikipedia. Obviously, these are spoilers. And so you can skip ahead or stop listening for 2 or 3 minutes. Skip ahead if you're watching this pre-recorded. Cassie Thomas is a 30-year-old woman who lives in Ohio with her parents. Years earlier, she was in medical school. However, after her best friend Nina Fisher was raped by their classmate Al Monroe, and the school and legal system failed her, Nina and Cassie dropped out. It is implied that Nina eventually committed suicide. By night, Cassie now goes to clubs and feigns drunkenness to get a man to take her home. She wants for them to attempt to take advantage of her, and then reveals her sobriety. The coffee shop where she works, Cassie encounters a former classmate, Ryan Cooper. He asks her out and mentions during their first date that Al is getting married. Cassie begins a plan to exact revenge on those she holds responsible for Nina's rape and death. She first invites an old friend, Madison McPhee, who's a woman played by Alison Brie, who disbelieved Nina's accusation, to lunch and gets her drunk, then has a man she hired take Madison to her hotel room. After the incident, Cassie ignores all her calls. So our heroine in this film arranges the rape of another woman because she didn't believe the story. Now, it seems rather unclear exactly when this film is supposed to take place. I've heard the suggestion on Red Letter Media, they said maybe 15 years or so ago. The date rape phenomenon has been around for 30 years. The very idea that a university would not take seriously any accusation of rape by a male student on a female student it's absolutely preposterous. And there is so much about this film that seems, well, hardly believable or even risible. But again, I haven't seen it. I'll report back after I have. It seems that perhaps we're not supposed to take all of this as the gospel truth. But the fact that the heroine of a movie arranges to get another woman raped, that doesn't seem to be the controversial thing about this film. It has to do with the casting. This is from the LA Times. Promising young woman kerfuffle goes on. Critics condemn apology to Carey Mulligan. After media coverage of a conversation between actress Zendaya, and Carey Mulligan, in which Mulligan delves into her qualms about a Variety review for a promising young woman and her appreciation for an apology that was later issued, the National Society of Film Critics published a statement Tuesday condemning the publication's actions. We wish to register our alarm at Variety's shabby treatment of our colleague. The group said it's also calling for the apology on freelance critic Dennis Harvey's review to be taken down. If Variety felt the language in Harvey's review was insensitive, insinuating it had the option of working with him to fix that in the editing process before it ran, the statement continued. Variety could have acknowledged and responded to Mulligan's criticism, it said, rather than simply capitulating to it and undermining its own critic. Mulligan first spoke out against the review in an interview published by the New York Times in December. In his piece, Harvey described Mulligan, who plays the lead, as a fine actress before going on to say that she's, quote, a bit of an odd choice as this admittedly many-layered apparent femme fatale, unquote. I have seen a great number of clips from this film and still photos, and Carey Mulligan, she looks dreadful in this film. She looks drawn. She looks old. And later in the film, I don't know, I can't comment yet on how I would actually regard this. I'm looking at a still of her with rainbow-colored hair. And when I mean rainbow-colored hair, I mean rainbow-colored hair. She looks absolutely frightening. I mean, she is sending off a vibe which says, stay away from me if you value your life. And this is apparently her seduction get up. So the English actress, writer, director Emerald Fennell spoke to Yahoo News about her difficulties in pitching this script. And an interview with Olivia Wilde for Variety. So we have Zendaya doing interviews and Olivia Wilde giving interviews. Are journalists all going to be replaced by actresses now? At the first round of pitching was very much pitching to men. It was really interesting to me, this is Fennell, to get the immediate response, because some of it was really wonderful. One guy, when I pitched it to him, and then she sits up and she's not drunk. He was kind of sitting, staring into space for a while. And then he said, yeah, I'm just thinking about a couple of dates I've been on. Yeah, that's exactly what he said. What he confessed to, what, statutory rape or the equivalent? Yeah, at a pitch meeting. Okay. That's honest. And then one guy said, oh, I got it. So she's a psycho. Not for you, my friend. Okay. Well, she does appear to be a psycho. And again, she hires someone to rape Alison Brie. This is our heroine. This is the woman that we're supposedly to be cheering throughout. I wanted to say something about the kinds of films that women like. Now, apparently we're told that women like feminist films, and I guess they like revenge films. But there's the Hallmark channel, and there's the Lifetime channel, and these channels are for women. Lifetime almost exclusively for women. Hallmark has some family audience as well. But they make these films for women, and they make a lot of films. I have found myself watching Lifetime movies, a few of them. They're in the genre of women in danger, and they're all preposterous, and they all seem to be filmed outside Vancouver in like Langley, say. There was a film that I saw a couple of years ago. There was a woman who had been wrongfully convicted of murder and spent 20 years in prison for it, and then went back to the place where this had happened and got involved in some sort of investigation. A woman who spent 20 years in prison for a murder she didn't commit would be a husk of a human being. I saw a movie in which a woman, I forget the circumstances, but they were preposterous. She was a mother. She had a teenage girl in high school, and she was somehow blackmailed into committing a series of armed robberies. And it was just yesterday that I saw a large part of a film called The Killer downstairs. Let's see the summary here. Allison Peters has always done everything right, but finds her life in turmoil as a lawyer stuck working at a grocery store job. What? Desperate for cash, she rents her basement on micasasucasa.com and gets a response from James Brewer, who explains that he and his wife have recently split. At work, Allison and her friend Sarah deal with the boss, Brandon, who's been harassing Allison. When Brandon is murdered, the police are suspicious of her. As romance begins to bloom between Allison and James, more people in her life begin disappearing. Okay. I suppose it is a hallmark, no pun intended, of these films that the female lead is supposed to be irresistible to men. The female lead in this film is played by an actress called Cindy Busby. She's attractive enough, I guess, but she's kind of mousy. And there is nothing in her looks or her personality, at least as displayed in this film, that would suggest that she is irresistible to men, but she is irresistible to every man in this film. Now, she doesn't work in a grocery store. She works in a big box store. Near the beginning of this film, I saw her and she was getting ready to go for work and she was wearing a blue vest. Keep in mind that this film was shot in a house, that I would reckon is worth somewhere between $3 and $5 million. It's an absolutely enormous, sprawling place and good taste, too. So why is she living in this house? Why is she working in a big box store when she's living in this house? Or her parents decided to take a break or something and left her with the house. Okay, all right. And so how come she isn't a lawyer anymore? Because that sort of career move from lawyer to wearing a blue vest with your name on it, that doesn't happen. It's not explained until almost near the end of the movie, but it turns out that she had resigned from her high-flying lawyering job because she'd had an affair with a male lawyer at that same firm, and she wanted to start afresh. So she quit her job and got a job at the big box store, which, of course, has never happened. But once again, she is irresistible to all men. Like so many of the women in these films, she is stupid. And these terrible things are going on around her. And it's really obvious, almost from the beginning, who the killer is. It's the hunky guy who lives in the basement. And when I say hunky, these cheap romance novels for women that feature a guy with his shirt off, he looks just like that, with the mustache hair and the sort of half beard, and he's tall and he's got a lantern jaw, And, he looks like he could tear someone's head off. He's so, cut. But he's irresistibly attracted to Allison for some reason, which we don't really understand. I suppose it's not necessary for us to understand this. This is a guy who could go into a bar or a nightclub 7 days a week, and he would leave home. He would leave there with a woman. Okay. But no, he's pining for mousy Allison. She finds him in her kitchen. Okay. He's got into the kitchen. He's downstairs. She's upstairs. And he's making food, right? He has invaded her kitchen. And she doesn't seem to understand that he's crossed a line there. Everything about this guy is sketchy. His story doesn't make any sense. He doesn't seem to have a job. And then we find out that apparently this is a cliche in these Lifetime movies, that the man who is obsessed with the woman, he plants cameras in her bedroom or all sorts of places, in the rooms where she lives. These are always radio-controlled cameras. Now, of course, I have a camera right up there, and it cost me about $170, and it's connected to my computer by a wire. I can't tell you, how much such a remote camera would cost, but I expect it would be very expensive indeed. And also, these cameras are put in places such that, one of them was put in a flower bowl. And of course, there's no possibility that she might, push the flower bowl or knock the camera over or happen to look down and say, what is that? What's that in the vase here? Oh my God, it's a camera. No, that never, ever happens. But it just struck me that this is a willing, disbelief, refusing to believe what's going on, as all of these men who showed interest in her start, dropping off, killed in horrible ways, that essentially this woman is almost a rape fantasy. This woman, she wants to have sex with a murderer, and she does. Now, she doesn't know that he's the murderer because she's stupid, too stupid to be believed, but she kills him in the end in a way which is, again, deeply unbelievable. And in the final scene of the movie, she has this, another staple. Her best friend from work and best friend in life, is a woman who is much, much, much less attractive than she is. And she has been trying to get another lawyering job, which she does. And so after this gruesome attempted murder of her and her best friend and the killing of the guy who lived downstairs, and then, the whole truth is revealed, apparently she goes right to work at her new job at this new legal firm. And the final scene, we see that her best friend is now the receptionist at this law firm, and we see them going out to lunch. We don't know how much time has passed. It's as if nothing had happened. Given what this woman went through and what her friend went through, because she is captured, tied up, gagged, prepped for death. This is the sort of thing which typically results in, months of therapy before people would be able to go back to work, particularly since the legal firm is tied into the whole murders. I mean, it's connected. It's just not some other firm. That's a plot point there. But I mentioned all this, and I've gone on about this for so long, because it seems to me that Lifetime is making the kind of movies that women like to watch because they make so many of them. And this Cindy Busby woman, at a time when, work is hard to get in Hollywood, she appeared in 5 movies in 2020. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of this Lifetime kind of stuff in 2019. So, yeah, I think there's the movies that we're told that women want to watch, and there are the movies that women actually want to watch. Let's go to the chat. Women love revenge. Remember Medea of Greek fame, says Hikma Warrior. Yes, indeed. Palpicasso88 says KMG should review Lifetime movies once a week. This is hilarious. Charles Leno. Hello, Charles. I haven't communicated with you for a while because my smartphone turned into a brick about 7, 8, 9 days ago. I have no idea what is wrong with it. I get nothing from it at all. It just one day it just stopped working completely. So I'm going to have to try to deal with that. Palpicasso88 says Olivia Wilde is scary looking. She is scary looking. Okay, we're talking about Roosh. I know very little about him. Didn't he was a PUA guy who's now repented of that, if I got that right. Hickman Warrior says, I'd live in a hotel if I could find a decent one. People couldn't be worse anyhow. I don't know. I don't know about that. Okay. Coronavirus, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Okay. Why live in a hotel? Well, yeah, it just, okay. Have you seen that Ryan Reynolds movie where he's stuck in a coffin? That whole movie, says Buddy. No. I saw a movie that he made with this blonde actress, the one in The Big Bang Theory, maybe, or another similar woman who might have been married to that action hero I was talking about, the one Chris, who lost all the weight, and he wears a fat suit through a just. This was a major motion picture. It's horrifying in its stupidity, its disgustingness, and it is not funny. It is simply not funny. But of course, I see so much that is supposed to be funny that is not funny. Okay, I'm going to get back to it here. Imagine you were a mother and your young child decided to pretty much strip off for Instagram or maybe OnlyFans. Would you be proud? Because a great many of these Hollywood types do seem to be proud. To wit, Lisa Rinna. What is wrong with you? Lisa Rinna defends daughter Amelia Gray Hamlin's lingerie snaps after a troll brands the images disgusting. Oh, by the way, Charisma Carpenter, for all her talk about, yes, being judged on her body, did a Playboy spread in the 2000s, and she defended it, saying that she'd had a child, and so she wanted to lose weight and reaffirm her attractiveness, and the money was good, and it was good career-wise. Pick one or the other, ladies. Model Amelia, at 19, was met with praise from the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills star as she posed up a storm in white lace underwear by Boule Avenue in images shared to Instagram on Tuesday. And there's a picture here. You know that I'm trying to think, the Paul Verhoeven movie, Starship Troopers, where this guy gets his brains literally sucked out. Okay, this is what this young woman looks like. It is terrifying to behold. But someone found the image disgusting. And it leaves little to the imagination, as they say. And there comes mom, 57-year-old mom, coming to her defense. What is wrong with you? Bella Hadid, and I barely know who these Hadids are. I do know that they're famous for something or other. Bella Hadid shuts down commenter who says she looks tired in sexy swimsuit selfie. This is from People. I'm sorry that my bags offend you, the supermodel clapped back in the comment section of her Instagram post. Is she really a super model? When I found out how young this woman is and how old she looks in this, well, particularly in this video that she made, she looks like 10, 15 years older. I guess being a famous for something or other a person is absolutely exhausting. It's widely believed that this woman has had many, many plastic surgeries and started having it when she was still a teenager. What a miserable life that must be. Rihanna, the singer, she hasn't made a record in, 4 years? And her latest record seems to have been scrubbed. There are rumors that she has lost her voice. She has reinvented herself as a couturier and more, a parfumier. And this infuriates me. Like these celebrities. Oh, yes, your celebrity cookbooks and all the rest of it. Not everyone can cook at a high level, and designing clothing, designing perfumes, designing makeup and the like, that is a skill. That is a high skill. But no less than Louis Vuitton decides that, no, we have Rihanna line now because, of course, she knows how to design clothes because she wears clothes. According to the Mail, Louis Vuitton owner LVMH and music star Rihanna have agreed to suspend her fashion line Fenty less than 2 years after its launch, the French luxury goods giant said on Wednesday. LVMH said in a statement that the brand based in Paris would be put on hold pending better conditions, a rare setback for the luxury group, which has weathered the coronavirus crisis better than most rivals. The R&B singer 32 and LVMH launched the Fenty, that's, by the way, her surname, Fenty, fashion brand in May 2019, only the second time the French group had set a label up from scratch as it looked to tap soaring demand for luxury celebrity collaborations. No, you get to be wealthy and you don't want to buy clothes because they're good. You want to buy clothes because they have a famous person's name on them. Well, then this wealth is wasted on you. Rihanna, named the richest female musician in the world in 2019, is said to be sad at the decision. Her popular Savage X Fenty lingerie line and cosmetic lines Fenty Beauty and Fenty Skin are set to continue. Yeah, I wonder about this. And I'm looking about this absurd get-up kit that she has presumably designed that she is wearing. It is a combination leather jacket and skirt. And it doesn't fit. It has baggy, voluminous sleeves made of leather, and leather is rather heavy, and which cover her entire hands. Perhaps she thought that this was fashionable somehow. I'm not just going to pick on Rihanna. Stella McCartney is another offender. Oh, yes, she is a famous designer, which has nothing to do with her father being Sir Paul McCartney. I've seen many pictures of her models on the catwalk, and her clothes don't fit the models. You see, when you're having a show, it's not a question of whether your clothes are going to fit, all sorts of women. No, you just have to cover the women who are going to be on the catwalk, and Stella McCartney can't do that. But apparently it would be cruel to point out that she is no good at the thing that has made her rich. Or maybe they don't want to offend Sir Paul. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay, David Shelley says we need some guests on those beds. No, I don't even know whether one is allowed to have guests in hotels in British Columbia. Now, I'm not joking about that. Chogokin666 says Gorilla Glue Girl has a Patreon. It's in the tens of thousands. So explain to me, I saw this woman with a shaved head or just the stubble head, and it was covered with Gorilla Glue. Was her intent that she was going to use the Gorilla Glue to affix a wig or weaves? Was that what was going on? Gamian says Rihanna's clothes store website is so ugly. It's all overweight black chicks and cheap looking lingerie. Okay. Anyone watch COE in here, says Ultra Testosterone. What is COE? I'm not familiar with that. Okay. All right. I'm going to talk about, guess what I'm going to talk about now? I'm going to talk about maskne. But first, before I get to that, this is from the Associated Press. U.S. government researchers found that 2 masks are better than 1 in slowing coronavirus spread, but health officials stopped short of recommending that everyone double up. The CDC on Wednesday reported the results of a lab experiment that spaced 2 artificial heads 6 feet from each other and checked to see how many coronavirus particles spewed by one were inhaled by the other. The researchers found that wearing one mask, surgical or cloth, blocked about 40% of the particles coming toward the head that was breathing in. When a cloth mask was worn on top of a surgical mask, about 80% were blocked. Yeah. And I'll go to what William Briggs had to say about that. I mean, the response is pretty obvious, you know. And let me find exactly what his response is for this. That is to say, these laboratory conditions are not going to be replicated in life. They're absolutely not going to be. He writes, no, this was a lab study and useless. Everybody already knew more masks would block more airflow. That's not what masking is like in actuality. Our experts are idiots in love with models. Yes, you are not supposed to have a beard. You're supposed to be close shaven, and the masks are supposed to be tight, skin tight. And a great many masks are not like that. Also, you're not supposed to touch the mask. It's, I think you know the drill by now. But we saw Nancy Pelosi and Mitt Romney and others wearing the 2 masks. And this is going to be the fashion statement. However, I can see women turning on masks like that. This is from CBS Baltimore, WJZ. Masks are now a part of our everyday lives. For some people, what's underneath the mask is giving them issues they've never had before. It's not what our skin is used to, having a piece of material covering a majority of our face, trapping moisture and bacteria against our skin. There's so much more irritation from the mask, whether it's causing friction, moisture, the heat, Dr. Sarah Cannon of Cannon Dermatology said. Cannon said many patients who have battled acne in the past are having flare-ups. We're seeing a lot of new cases of patients coming in with new onset acne who have never had acne before. Cannon suggests proper hydration, keeping makeup off the skin that is covered, and washing your mask after each use. The discomfort is one thing, but how you feel about yourself is another. Julie Newton is an esthetician at Spa on the Boulevard and said her appointments have been filling up with people who need some TLC for their facial skin. It's definitely something everybody is struggling with right now, Newton said. It's not something to be really embarrassed about either, especially if you're looking to get help. That's why we're here. She suggests a hydrofacial and a good skincare routine to help keep your skin clear. Canna said everyone is different and treatment is on a case-by-case basis. If over-the-counter washes and creams don't work, you're encouraged to call a doctor to get help. I can just imagine women in their 20s or perhaps early 30s, and suddenly they develop acne on their faces, and then they find out it's because of their mask. That's quite, obviously pretty horrifying situation. Your late 20s, early 30s, acne. And then you find out it's from the mask. What to do? What to do? Well, I suppose you could just, recognize that masks don't work. Oh, and Glenn Greenwald is in the news again. It's from the Daily Mail. Tucker Carlson and Glenn Greenwald have slammed Facebook for bowing down to a liberal mob following its decision to remove posts that it says spread misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine. The Fox News host on Tuesday hated out authorities over the handling and publicity of the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, saying that it had all been fluff and propaganda, and compared it to a Diet Pepsi commercial at the Super Bowl. His comments followed Facebook's decision to delete posts that it deemed to include misinformation about the vaccine, a move Tucker slammed as censorship. Well, it is censorship by definition. Censorship is not, it's not pejorative. It's simply a statement of fact. If you take things down, if you take speech down, that is censorship. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It doesn't matter whether what is being stated is true or false or unproven. It's still censorship. Carlson said that Americans are being discouraged from asking simple, straightforward questions about the safety and possible adverse side effects of the vaccine. These questions are not conspiracy theories, he said. They're the most basic questions in a democracy. Every citizen has a right to know the answer, but instead we got fluff and propaganda. And yes, congratulations to Carlson for that. And Glenn Greenwald, who had taken aim against what he called the hall monitors, who now dominate the mainstream media, he said that Facebook was pressured into censoring vaccine posts by a media mob. Quote, I think it's so important to recognize that Silicon Valley companies are not the ones who want to do this. They would rather stay as far away from censoring and arbitrating and intervening and kicking people off their platforms, not because they are noble or nice, but because it's in their best interest not to do it. They're being pressured to do it by CNN and NBC and the New York Times, who are saying, every time you allow information over the platform that we think is wrong, we're going to shame you, disgrace you. And they have partners who are the Democratic Party, who control the entire government, right along with them, saying, we demand you censor more. Strikes me as being an accurate assessment of the situation. Oh, but again, from the Daily Beast, these anti-vaxxers, I don't know, they have to be dealt with. No question about it. This is from Kelly Weil. Anti-vaxxers who shut down Dodger Stadium plot creepy sequel. They already temporarily sabotaged one of the largest vaccine sites in America. Get ready for more, powered by a deluded new fantasy comparing nurses to Nazis. The video is everywhere in the comment section of anti-vaccination Facebook pages. In it, a prominent vaccine opponent makes false claims about the safety of COVID-19 vaccines. Then he goes on to tell another dangerous lie. Legally, he says all those people giving vaccinations are war criminals. I'll repeat that. And he does. This claim, which cites a bogus legal theory based on Nazi war crime trials, is not true. Please explain why. This hasn't stopped conspiracy theorists from spamming it in Facebook comments and uploading it across the internet, where individual clips have received more than 100,000 views. Meanwhile, conspiracy theorists are planning new in-person demonstrations outside vaccination sites. It's the new front of the COVID denialist right. In my experience, a great many anti-vaxxers are not right-wing. They are, in fact, left-wing, but never mind that. And it's veering increasingly toward targeting the individuals providing Americans with vaccines. In an anti-vaccination Facebook groups and Telegram channels, some users are furiously familiarizing themselves with the Nuremberg Code, a 1947 document laid out at the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal that prescribed new guidelines against forced medical experiments. Those rules came into response to the horrors of the Holocaust, during which Nazi doctors conducted cruel procedures on non-consenting subjects. If you were told that you cannot get on an airplane, if you cannot leave the country, if you cannot enter a store, if you cannot keep your job, if you do not get the jab, this does not sound like consent to me. It is typically understood. This is a claim that could put healthcare workers at risk. Let's not worry about the people who are actually getting the vaccinations. No. It's the frontline workers, the warriors. They're the only important people. Okay. These people don't even bother looking into the facts at the most basic level. Jason Lefkowitz, the organizer behind the event, told the Daily Beast he believed healthcare workers were breaking the Nuremberg Code. They aren't, and that the inoculations are not vaccines. They are. The mRNA vaccines are not vaccines. They are unlike vaccines of the past. Traditionally, vaccines infect you with a small amount of the virus, so you develop a resistance to it. That's not how mRNA vaccines work, but I'm sure that the writer of that story doesn't believe that that's relevant. Some news of actual courage from my own country. This is from National Newswatch. Two members of Alberta Premier Jason Kenney's caucus are challenging the province's COVID-19 economic restrictions and have joined a national coalition pushing against lockdowns. Drew Barnes, the United Conservative Legislature member for Cypress Medicine Hat, and Angela Pitt, the Deputy Speaker of the House and Chair of Committees, say Albertans have not been given adequate evidence to justify the rules, and real hardship and harm is resulting. Down here in Medicine Hat, our mental health crisis is as big as our COVID crisis, Barnes said in an interview. Let's give people more freedoms. He said the province should take a more regional approach to restrictions. Yes, exactly. As I keep on complaining or whining, I live on an island where last time I checked, there had been 11 deaths on this whole island, which has a population of about 800,000 people. And yet the restrictions here are just as draconian as they are in the mainland, which makes no sense whatsoever. But of course, this is going to get Jason Kenney, the premier, into a lot of trouble because he hasn't closed everything down in Alberta. And apparently this was a dreadful mistake. Oh my God, the people are going to church in Alberta. And even worse, people are going to an Earl's restaurant in Edmonton. Earl's is a somewhat upmarket chain of restaurants. I used to go there. Well, they have them here too, but there was an Earl's in Edmonton I used to go to with the coworkers all the time. And this breaking news from CTV: watch, large group defies public health order at Edmonton restaurant. A video that appears to show more than 10 people at an Earl's booth was taken Tuesday night at the Edmonton Crossroads location. CTV News has concerned. We are deeply concerned by a video shared on social media showing a group gathered together at our Edmonton Crossroads location on the evening of February the 9th, an Earl's spokesperson said via email. Earl's can confirm that a group of guests did indeed gather at one table for a brief period. After initially being seated separately in accordance with health guidelines, this group was asked to disperse by a server on shift, and the guests complied with this request. It's not enough. There must be sanctions. There must be punishment. Someone called Stacy, who was pushing this, tweeted, "Got this video on my DMs last night. Jason Kenney, you've made a big mistake." Jason Kenney has nothing to do with this. I watched the video, and it seemed to be the majority of the people who were there in that group of 10 without masks were members of racial minorities. I want to see these people say that the government is interfering in their culture, is attempting to suppress their culture, because, in their cultures, closeness to other people is important. Apparently, white people, they can just stare at screens all day long, and that's good enough for them. But amongst our people, we need to be close to other people like us. I'd like to see them say this, because I think they could go pretty far with that, because the rejection by racial minorities, particularly blacks, of vaccines is already posing a huge problem for medical authorities and medical bureaucrats. And I find it all very amusing, actually. According to The Hill, the new American Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, says that officials are considering a requirement that passengers provide a negative COVID-19 test ahead of domestic flights. One of Biden's first confirmed cabinet members has told Axios on HBO that the Centers for Disease Control is engaged in an active conversation on whether to implement the requirement. What I can tell you is it's going to be guided by data, by science, by medicine, and by the input of the people who are actually going to carry this out. But here's the thing. The safer we can make air travel in terms of perception as well as reality, the more people are going to be ready to get back into the air. And, yes, news from Britain, which is becoming more and more insane. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has poured cold water on holiday hopes, warning no guarantees this year. Yes, he actually said that don't bother planning or, arranging, buying a holiday because it might not happen for the whole of the year. It's February the 10th, and the end of the year is 10 and a half months away. The comments from Shapps sparked fury from the travel industry, who said the summer season must happen. Downing Street slapped down the cabinet minister, insisting it is personal choice whether to book holidays. Government is facing a backlash over threat of a 10-year sentence for lying about visiting countries on red list. And so I looked up this. It's curious, the Daily Mail story about this. I thought, who is this Sprague, who is a transportation minister in Britain? Because he looked like he was in his 20s. And then I find out that Grant Shapps is 50, something like that. But he has styled himself to look as if he is in his 20s. And curiously, the banner picture on his Twitter page, he very closely resembles, and I'm sure this is no accident, Tony Blair. Yes. Oh, and how about some special pleading? From Grant Shapps? He was on Good Morning Britain yesterday, where he said, coronavirus that gets everybody got my dad. We're all very worried. Grant Shapps talks to Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid about his dad, who is currently on a COVID ward in hospital. He praises the NHS for the way they're working and caring for patients, including his dad. Apparently, the word father is unknown to Good Morning Britain. He's got a big smile on his face here. He's talking about his father, who is 89 years old. Okay. Now, I don't wish for anyone's death, and obviously the death of Grant Shapps' father is going to be a painful one for him. But when he says that coronavirus that gets to everybody, he is lying. We have known this from the very beginning of the epidemic, that the average age of people being killed by COVID-19 is in the 80s. That the average age, in fact, is higher than average longevity. So it is not everyone's disease. And of course, this is the same lie that we were fed about AIDS back in the 1980s, and I don't recall an apology from Anthony Fauci, who was pushing this pernicious lie, or any of the others who pushed this pernicious lie and terrified tens of or hundreds of millions of people as a result. Oh, Neil Ferguson. Yeah, the Neil Ferguson who's not the historian, the fellow who keeps making preposterous predictions and still has a job. Oh, and who violated the guidelines, the prohibition, the lockdown, which was based on his own model to facilitate adultery. That Neil Ferguson. Britain locked down too late to prevent spiraling coronavirus deaths in the autumn, according to the scientist whose grisly predictions led to the first shutdown. Professor Lockdown, Neil Ferguson, a government advisor and Imperial College London epidemiologist, also accused ministers of failing to learn the lessons from the first wave last spring. He added that face masks and social distance measures are likely to stay in place for the rest of the year because of the risk from mutant variants. He was wrong about foot and mouth disease. His predictions in the past led to the needless slaughter of millions of livestock, animals. He's been wrong about everything, and yet he still teaches at Imperial College, and he is still a government advisor, and he is still invited to terrorize people in the pages of the Daily Mail. I guess being what? He's not even an epidemiologist. He's a theoretical physicist. That's what he's trained in. But it seems that epidemiology is a profession that is, as Tom Wolfe would say, an unscrewable pooch. You may have thought that I was joking when I've said in the past that now COVID-19 is the only real disease. All other diseases are, they're fake. They're wannabe diseases. Well, here's another story from the Mail. Waiting more than a year for NHS treatment will become the norm after COVID pandemic, health service bosses warn. A year. Yeah. It urged the government to have an honest conversation with the public about the future, warning that patients can expect to be waiting over 12 months for routine operations for some years. So you're going to have that tumor removed, say, well, I guess you're just going to have to wait for over a year. How many hundreds of thousands of people are going to die because of this? Latest figures show 192,000 people in England have been waiting 12 months or more for treatment, compared to about 1,600 last January. Yes, if we want to talk about who's killing whom and who's responsible for more deaths, yes, let's have that conversation, particularly when the average age of people who die of COVID-19 in Britain, as it is everywhere else, is in the 80s. William Briggs, a statistician to the Stars, writes, infections drop, experts baffled. And subhead, expertology. The Daily Mail headline is that experts were baffled that coronadoom cases, by which they mean infections, fell by 50%, and that in other headlines, they were plummeting. One of the headlines, like many in the media, pointed to the highest death day ever. It wasn't. That was back on 15th April, when over 6,000 doom deaths were reported. Since day one, I warned that reporting and reality don't match up, not in medical data. Check for yourself, and you'll see last week's highest death day ever was obviously a reporting trick. The media is the enemy of the people. Incidentally, it's worth your time to enter experts baffled COVID or coronavirus into search engines, focusing on news, many headlines going back to last March. A lot of expert bafflement, but no shortage of confidence that quarantining the healthy and sick together and that masking masklessness a federal crime are terrific ideas. Anyway, regular readers will know that since December, maybe before I lost count, we've been making one of the easiest predictions that can be made, that deaths would peak in mid-January or so and would then begin to fall, because this happens every single year without exception and for the same reasons. Voluntary lockdowns due to the cold weather. We all start hurting in late fall. The bugs circulate and the bodies start piling up in December, with the peak again in early January. By the end of January, the most susceptible die off and the rates go down. Deaths of all kinds. Meaning a guy who had a cardiac and keeled over after New Year's died, in fact, of an MI. But that he also got a bad cold or flu or bronchitis or whatever pushed him over the edge. MI being myocardial infarction, I believe. Only this year, if the man got the doom, instead of putting heart attack on the death certificate, they'd instead put the corona doom. Oh, yes, and a reference here to the, what do they call themselves, the people who believe that the zero COVID crowd. This is really, really frightening, because if the zero COVID crowd get their way, medicine as we have come to know it, or medical treatment as we have come to know it, will disappear. Briggs tweets, calm yourselves, cowardly experts. The flu, the common cold, syphilis, Ebola, many, many others, including the most deadly of all, rabies, will always be with us. The corona doom is just one more. But it's ever so special for reasons that have yet to be explained. It's simply the argument from authority. This is Will Jones at Lockdown Skeptics. Health Secretary Matt Hancock yesterday announced severe penalties for those not complying with the new border quarantine arrangements, including a 10-year prison sentence for lying about where you had traveled from. I mentioned this yesterday. The reaction to this has been incredulity, horror, outrage, etc., etc. The cost to the traveler of mandatory stay in a quarantine hotel, which Britain has mandated, will be £1,750 for 10 nights, making travel all but unaffordable, save for determined business users and those with a few grand to spare. Jonathan Van Tam, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, number 2 Latrine Walla, in England, said the more elaborate your plans are for summer holidays in terms of crossing borders, in terms of household mixing, household mixing. Given where we are now, I think we may just have to say the more you are stepping in and making guesses about the unknown at this point. Lord Sumption, who is one of the lockdown heroes, thundered that Matt Hancock's connection with reality, which has been getting looser for some time, has finally snapped. Kirsty Alsop, TV fixture, says we have to stand against this. 10 years in jail. This isn't the thin end of the wedge. It's the whole thing. It's a step too far, an indication of how insane this has become. Anyone interested in any degree of democracy cannot allow this to go unquestioned. I don't know. It doesn't seem to make any difference. Here's a piece on the zero COVID cult. Vaccines are the great hope. This is from Dermot Martin at Laboratory News. But the virus's agility and ability to mutate, they can only be a part of the solution unless the infection rates are reduced to close to zero. A consensus is emerging, consensus among some in the scientific community, that to break out from this trap, we need a fresh approach. It's called zero COVID, and is being discussed in Germany, Ireland, and Canada. There seems to be little talk about it in the UK beyond an excellent comment piece in the Lancet. Oh dear, we have to move away from reactive harm reduction and towards proactive control of the pandemic, comprising all social, health, and economic areas of our society with a clear goal that enables a return to freedom and stability. In 5 years' time? 10 years' time? What, in 5 to 10 years' time, but people being locked into their homes? No. No, these people have to be slapped down, or else things are coming to a head really soon. Really soon now. Let's look at what Alex Berenson has to... Oh, no, first of all, Is COVID-19 hysteria driven by the media? Is the Pope Catholic? Professor Philip Bagas, professor of economics at the University Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid, and a Lockdown Skeptics reader, has a new article in a top journal entitled COVID-19 and the Political Economy of Mass Hysteria. He and his colleagues argue that mass and digital media in connection with the state may have had adverse consequences during the COVID-19 crisis, particularly through driving collective hysteria. Yes, however, mass hysteria can be exacerbated and self-reinforcing when the negative information comes from an authoritative source, when the media are politicized and social networks make the negative information omnipresent. We conclude that the negative long-term effects of mass hysteria are exacerbated by the size of the state. Do you listeners, do you think that zero COVID is going to take off? That our governments are going to adopt zero COVID, knowing as they must do that it's not simply a question of smashing the economy, it's pretty much bringing the economy to a halt? I mean, you can't be too safe. Actually, you can be too safe. That is the whole point of risk analysis. So let's look at what Alex Berenson has to say. The Miami Herald had tweeted the Biden administration is considering whether to impose domestic travel restrictions, including on Florida, fearful that coronavirus mutations are threatening to reverse hard-fought progress on the pandemic. Berenson says, hey, frogs, is it just me or is the water in this pot getting a little warm? Nah, you're right, just me. Trying to punish a state that has had fewer than the average number of COVID deaths because its success is embarrassing doesn't scream public health dictatorship at all. Oh, from Jake Tapper at CNN, Biden White House now backtracking from an original pledge to have most schools open within 100 days. Maybe the teachers can, they're really close to what they have long dreamed of being well paid for not working at all. You know, from going from 3 months off a year to 12 months off a year. Stephen Goldstein had said, I don't know what the link is, but Alex Berenson is a dangerous person who spreads many false things about COVID and vaccines. Broadly speaking, of course, some people statistically will die shortly after being vaccinated. Doesn't mean the vaccine killed them. Berenson comments, you had me at, I don't know what that link is, but science. It's the official European database of vaccine side effects reports. Details. By the way, Stephen Goldstein is a virologist. You might think that knowing about the vaccine side effect databases is in his job description. Guess again. Oh, okay. We were talking about the Nuremberg laws of 1947. This is from the Jerusalem Post today. Health minister will start sanctioning the unvaccinated. Those who can't prove they have been vaccinated will not be allowed into certain businesses, barring their access from those services such as gyms, hotels, restaurants, and cultural and sports centers. The health ministry is also working on a plan to minimize the amount of testing centers throughout the country and make it harder to get tested as well. Oh, okay. And Berenson's comment is, how do you spell vaccine? C-O-E-R-C-E. By the way, I may have been too optimistic about the national level Israeli data. The new update on serious cases was not great. Yes. Various ethical standards, including those in Britain, officially state that you cannot coerce people into medical treatment. But since COVID-19 is worse than the bubonic plague, and it is unlike any other virus that has ever existed and constitutes an existential threat to all life on Earth, we can just throw out all ethical guidelines and we can coerce as much as we want. These are, keep in mind, these are experimental drugs. They're experimental because they were not properly tested. Remember warp speed? Yeah, What could go wrong in forcing hundreds of millions or billions of people to take drugs, experimental drugs, particularly those that work on an RNA level? I guess we'll find out, huh? I guess we'll find out. But since the drug companies have all been protected, I guess they don't have anything to worry about. Let's go back to James Burnham and his discussion of Mosca and the ruling class. By 1923, when Mosca revised his major book, the English translation is made from this revised version, he had come to the conclusion that the great parliamentary representative governments of the 19th century had reached the highest level of civilization and juridical defense so far known in history. In many ways, this was a remarkable opinion for Mosca to have held. The chief theme of his entire work is a devastating attack on the entire theoretical basis of democratic and parliamentary doctrine. He gives not a little space to a withering exposure of concrete abuses under modern parliamentary government. In his critique of collectivism, he states, quote, "The strength of the socialist and anarchist doctrines lies not so much in their positive as in their negative aspects, in their minute, pointed, merciless criticism of our present organization of society," unquote. And he holds that the criticism is largely justified. Nevertheless, Mosca does not expect utopia or absolute justice. Societies must be judged relatively. The least evil is concretely the best, and the 19th century parliamentary nations, with all their weaknesses, were comparatively superior to any others that have yet existed. In their governmental structures, the autocratic principle functioning through the bureaucracy balanced the liberal principle expressed in the parliaments. The aristocratic tendencies of birth and inheritance were checked by a perhaps unprecedented ease with which vigorous new members were able to enter the ruling class. Above all, under these governments, there occurred an astounding expansion, not of one or a few restricted social forces, but of a great and rich variety, with no one force able to gain exclusive predominance over the rest. Commerce, as well as the arts, education, and science, technology, and literature all were able to flourish. His judgment on these governments thus follows from his general principles. He does not praise parliamentary government for its own sake, but because under the specific circumstances of the 19th century, it was accompanied by this relatively high level of civilization and juridical defense. That is to say, there were opposing forces that existed in the 19th century parliamentary nations, and the entry of vigorous new members into the ruling class. Well, we've seen the opposing forces largely disappear, and it is difficult, exceedingly difficult, for vigorous new members to enter the ruling class. And this accounts for the decadence of parliamentary government. Above all, he continues, Burnham does, he does not praise parliamentary government for its own sake. Yes, from this favorable judgment, however, Mosca did not conclude that the 19th century form of parliamentary government was necessarily going to last. It is the habit of utopians, of those who, like Dante, interpret politics as wish, not of scientists, to confuse their desires with what is going to happen. Mosca, on the contrary, believed that it was almost certain that parliamentary governments, as the 19th century had known them, were not going to last very much longer. Take a look at how people are voted into office throughout most of the world, where it's not first past the post. What this means is that typically the people who are elected in are not chosen by local communities, they're chosen by the parties. And since it is almost impossible for any one party to hold a majority, they must collaborate with all of these other parties in order to hold power, which essentially means that the same people are in power forever. And one of the results of that is that corruption becomes almost impossible to root out, because they all benefit from the same corrupt system. Back to Burnham, the War of 1914, he believed, marked the end of an age that could be considered as having begun with the French Revolution in 1789. The parliamentary governments were the great social achievement of that age, but the age was ending. In the new age, just beginning, these governments would be displaced. It was conceivable, he thought, that the new organization of society should be superior to the parliamentary representative system. Quote, if Europe is able to overcome the difficulties with which she is struggling at present, it is altogether probable that in the course of another century, or even within half that time, new ideas, new sentiments, new needs will automatically prepare the ground prepare the ground for other political systems that may be far preferable to any now existing, unquote. Burnham comments, but the depth of the crisis into which he understood that Europe had, with the First World War irrevocably entered, suggested the probability of attempts at extreme and catastrophic solutions. These, he believed, could lead only toward the destruction of liberty and a decline in the level of civilization. Though a small reserve of optimism was permissible, pessimism was on the whole called for by the facts. Well, Moscow was true in his prediction that we did see in Europe widespread attempts at extreme and catastrophic solutions. And essentially what happened after 1945, it was decided that opposition would not be allowed anymore, that we were all liberal Democrats now. And of course, the meaning of liberal democracy has become far more radical over the years. Now, you had opposition parties called the conservative parties, but they were essentially liberal as well. And as we have seen, the conservative parties have conserved nothing and barely now even try to conserve anything. They are desperate to prove just how liberal they are, or even more liberal than the so-called liberal parties. That it was decided after 1945 that that diversity in political opinion led to mass destruction and genocide, so it could not be allowed any longer. This chapter concludes with a quotation from Mosca. The feeling that springs spontaneously from an unprejudiced judgment of the history of humanity is compassion for the contradictory qualities of this poor human race of ours, so rich in abnegation, so ready at times for personal sacrifice, yet whose every attempt, whether more or less successful or not at all successful, to attain moral and material betterment, is coupled with an unleashing of hates, rancors, and the basest passions. A tragic destiny is that of men, aspiring ever to pursue and achieve what they think is the good. They ever find pretext for slaughtering and persecuting each other. Once they slaughtered and persecuted over the interpretation of a dogma or a passage in the Bible, then they slaughtered and persecuted in order to inaugurate the kingdom of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Today they are slaughtering and persecuting and fiendishly torturing each other in the name of other creeds. Perhaps tomorrow they will slaughter and torment each other in an effort to banish the last trace of violence and injustice from the earth. Prescient, wouldn't you say? And tomorrow we begin on Georges Sorel and the function of myth. And let's go back to the chat here. Ogan's Iron says, in response to Neil Terry, several Sanford guys like Leviat, Ioannidis, and others. These are skeptics, yes. Greg Cochran just calls them weird, doesn't explain. Calls them nuts, doesn't explain. I saw it reported that Gregory Cochran's son, I believe teenage son, saw a doctor. And Gregory Cochran and his wife freaked out about this. And so when he returned home, they quarantined him in his bedroom for 2 weeks. He was not allowed to leave. Food was delivered to him. Does this seem something that a rational man would do? Didn't Simone Gold go to jail? I don't know who Simone Gold is. Maybe sailors being pressured by UNS on the COVID issue. Well, I don't know. I mean, Sailor has long been exceedingly close to Gregory Cochran. He seems to accept Cochran's opinions as gospel, so that might explain it. Mosca means fly in Italian, says Chogokin 666. It's close to the mouche in French. There's a film by Robert Bresson, one of my favorites, called Mouchette. It's a term of abuse applied to a poor adolescent girl Oh, Ogunzires, Cochrane keeps calling the Stanford School nuts, yet does not elaborate. I don't know. They're just not panicking enough. You can never get enough panic. Okay. Neil Terry says, Talib, Saylor, and Cochrane all went a bit COVID nutty. Everyone has their weak points, I guess, and even good thinkers have exaggerated fear of death these days. I suppose I'm somewhat surprised because Saylor has shown himself to be resolutely skeptical about what we hear from our governments. But in this case, no. No, well, they must be right because they have our best interests in mind because, of course, the government always has our best interest in mind. Did you know that TikTok was the secret weapon that the Gen Z has against the millennials? Actually, I'm going to hold this over to tomorrow. I don't want to cheat it of time. It's a remarkable piece in the Canadian magazine, The Walrus. Just to give you a taste, this woman, Sejla Rizvich, who's a refugee from Bosnia who came to Canada and, of course, no longer is in Canada. She moved to the United States. Just like that Adler woman we were talking about at the top of the show. So she goes onto TikTok and she doesn't understand that it's a Chinese spying app. And she seems to be surprised and delighted that TikTok, based on its recommendations to her, seems to know everything about her life. Yeah. Maybe that's what Gen Z wants. Maybe they want the total elimination of privacy. But again, I will talk about that at length tomorrow. Tomorrow is a Thursday, a Theater Thursday, and I'm going to be talking about Don Siegel's film Charlie Varick, which is a particular favorite of mine. And on the book club on Friday, I'm going to be talking about Nick Kent's Apathy for the Devil. So that's the show for today. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be exceedingly well appreciated and highly useful to me, critical one might say. My PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. And if you're Canadian, donation to this live stream can be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.